Teachers of Reddit, what's the most NSFW thing a student did to you? Taught English in Korea for a year and, whilst there, became acquainted with the dongchim. This is where a student clasps both hands together and makes a point with two fingers. Think here's the church and here's the steeple, then they sneak up behind you and jab you straight in the butthole. TL, Dr. Korean kids tried to penetrate me in class. Edit, Hangul spelling. Goodness knows I don't want people to think that Korean kids proposition me in class. Male elementary teacher here. I'm 6 feet 6 inches, and kindergarten kids love to hug. Unfortunately, when I don't see it coming, I get a headbutt to the nuts. Former university professor. Had a female student flash me in front row last week of spring semester, no undies. Well, maybe it doesn't count as a flash if it lasts longer than 10 seconds. I gave her a good look, and then took a few seconds to regain my thoughts and kept my eyes up toward the higher seats. Unfortunately, she showed up at office hours the next day wearing the same skirt, and I was afraid she was going to up the ante. Fortunately, she didn't. One kid was running towards me with scissors. That shit is not safe for work. Female high school teacher here. A bathroom on the same floor of my classroom was having issues and made most of the surrounding classroom smell musty. At the beginning of my first class, a male student walked in and yelled, "IT smells like pussy in here," and then looked at me. Buddy of mine who is in grad school, therefore has a TA position, had a girl come into his office with a low-cut shirt, lean over his desk, and say "I'll do anything" 3 separate times. I thought that only happened in pornos. No, he did not go for it. Edit, added separate. She said that thrice during her visit to the office. 'Cause I'm sure he didn't get the hint the first time. This thread needs a lot less autism and more sexy, damn it. Well, I'm a male elementary teacher, so not much. One of my boys tried to tickle me once. Put a stop to that quickly. One of mine squeezed my boobs because I said I quite enjoyed The Dark Knight, and he didn't like it. He's 14. I do work in a special needs school though. How I kept a straight face and politely asked him not to do that, I do not know. I had a student offer me a cookie. Found out about an hour later it was a weed cookie. Edit, I understood that it was a weed cookie pretty quickly. Edit, no, I didn't turn the student in. I was a first-year young teacher and I didn't want to jeopardize her future and, more importantly, my career over it. During our prom, one of the hotter teachers got totally blitzed along with everyone else despite the fact everyone was underage. She then proceeded to grind against a student and try to lead him to the toilet. Other teachers dived in and covered up. To this day it remains the best cover-up I've ever seen. Teachers there deny anything happened, and some students who saw it are now doubting what they saw years later. Kid walks right up to an elderly teacher, maybe in her mid-60s. Asks her, "Do you know what a finger bang is?" She holds up her hand, shapes it like a gun and says, "Bang." The class busted up laughing so loud. She just smiled and told us to get back to work. She was a very mean teacher otherwise. Asked me what co-blocking was in the middle of my lesson. Edit, to give more on the story, the student was in 9th grade and was genuinely asking, so I assume he heard it from another student earlier in the day. I didn't really have a witty response and just said that it was inappropriate and ended the conversation there. I have worked in a developmentally disabled, self-contained room. I love my jobs and I love my students. But nakedness is norm, and sometimes you just accept that with severe forms of autism, clothes become a sensory issue. Unfortunately, during puberty, it also means that naked humping happens, and as a teacher, sometimes you are the target. Kid tried to mount me while I was on hands and knees cleaning up a spill made by another student. You just calmly turn, pry naked thrusting child off you, and explain to child that this is not an appropriate action for school and redirect. When I was doing my kindergarten internship, I quickly learned not to wear t-shirts that had sparkling letters on them. So many kids grabbed my breasts that day. Edit, autocorrect failed me. It was first year teaching out of college. I have a late birthday, so I was only 21 at the start of term and I taught seniors, so my oldest student was 19. Clearly this age difference led to many scary moments, but the worst was a shy little girl who approached me and in a very sincere way, asked if I would take her virginity. It was almost sad. I was joking around with some of my male students and told them, "If you don't get to class soon, I'm going to fillet you." Fillet. Like a fish. My students and I often make dark jokes like this. One student misheard it completely. "You're going to fillet us." When I taught school in England, There were a couple of times I started singing the refrain to "Don't Stand So Close to Me" when a certain 12-year-old female pupil tried to touch my junk. It got the class to look at me as witnesses to the event. It was also a way to embarrass the girl to behave properly. She didn't try it a third time. Using my favorite throwaway. I was in a relationship with one of my students for some months. I was 22, she was 17, completely legal in our country. She blew me in the staff room one evening. That was pretty NSFW. Edit. The age of consent in the country is 16, and as far as I know, staff/student relationships are not illegal, just sometimes frowned upon. One of my colleagues is openly dating one of his students, although she is 19. I did not resize her rectum. Op is thirsty again. We got caught playing strip poker in an empty class before homeroom by two female teachers in their 50s or 60s when I was 17. We asked them to join in, but they were more interested in getting us to put our clothes back on. My sister worked at a Catholic school teaching student ranging K through 12. She had a teenage student one semester that was constantly doodling in a notebook and not paying attention. She finally confiscated the book one day, and despite this kid being and pleading for her to not look at it, she of course did. The entire thing was filled with drawings of her, nude. I'm sure that wasn't awkward. Female teacher here. Taught in Japan, and a lot of our kids were from the wrong side of the tracks with a lot of family issues. One day one of the worst kids we had, hilarious bad kid, got mad at me when I wouldn't tell him my exact address, although I lived close to school so all the kids basically knew, and he angrily told me he was going to bring his buddies to my house and gang rape me. This was a 9th grader. But wow. First ever day teaching, 10th grade boys cornered me in the back oval and told me they were going to rape me. They even took the trouble to describe how much I'd enjoy it. I had a 7th grader flash her breasts at me. Actually, she was flashing the girl she was about to fight. But I was behind the girl. I teach at Psych Ward. Female here, I teach 5th grade LA. I had a student in the middle of class last year refer to my ass being apple-shaped and doing the grab ass motion with his hands. Also, my co-teacher, male, had a student removed from one of our classes because in the middle of class she was telling another student that when she's 18, he'd only be in his 30s and how they could then have sex. Both were really uncomfortable, and the guidance counselor and parent conferences were had because they're so young. Funnier, lighter story, I have a boy with autism in one of my classes, and one day it was particularly cold in the classroom. I walked by him as he was absent-mindedly feeling both his nipples, since they were protruding. The look he gave me when I told him to stop was absolutely hysterical. Edit. For clarification and lighter story. I had a kinder student who would frequently hug me and grab my ass, or hug me from behind while I was sitting down and go for my boobs. The sad thing was that she had been sexually abused. I spent a lot of time with her talking about our bodies and the appropriate ways to hug people. I'll never forget when she hugged me one day without touching me inappropriately. She looked up at me with such a joyful smile and said I did it the right way. I remembered. Excuse me for going off track, but I made out with a substitute teacher from my high school when I was 16. Edit. Nice. Not a teacher, but in high school, my marine biology teacher always kept me after class to talk to me, would hang around my desk during class, and even tried to get me to join the YMCA as a lifeguard so her and I could work together. She would also put her hands on me a lot. Thinking back, I should have done it. She was pretty hot. Till if I were a high school teacher I'd be in prison. AskReddit, please provide me with more FAP material. This wasn't done to me, thank God. But a little girl in my tutor group masturbated to orgasm constantly. I noticed it the first time I met her and asked her teacher about it afterwards. Apparently it was a known thing and you were just supposed to ignore it. Yeah. I feel totally comfortable sitting in a dark part of the library with a 9-year-old with her hands down her pants, moaning and gyrating. Yeah. Had a friend in high school who had no idea what a rim job was. He thought it had something to do with the huge rims on a car, pimp my ride style. Well, he turned at the lunch table and asked the greatest sub I've ever met what a rim job was. This man was well into his 60s if not older. He grabbed my friend by the shoulder and told him, "Son, you either need to find Jesus or new friends." I have never laughed so hard in my life. Friend of mine teaches sex education to 12-year-olds or young teens, or whatever age they start teaching sex ed. One time she was actually asked, "Miss Mississippi, can you get pregnant from a man weeing in your face?" It's my firm belief that David Cameron heard about this happening and that is why he now wants to censor the internet. I teach in Thailand. A student was trying to repeat a joke he heard from the protesters. The joke is supposed to go, "I don't need sex because the government already fucks me every day." Most Thai people cannot pronounce the V sound and instead they say a W sound. I thought this kid just out of nowhere was telling me, "I don't need sex because the grown men already fuck me every day." A lie wah? I'm a high school teacher now, but whilst I was studying, I traversed the murky waters of vacation care. It sucked. Teaching kids aged 13 to 18 is one thing, entertaining kids aged 5 to 13 for up to 12 hours is completely soul-draining. Anyway, I was around 24. I put Milo and Otis on the DVD player and felt something brush past my butt. It was the hand of an 8-year-old boy. I thought it was an accident until I overheard him bragging about it. I had to tell his mum about it, and in a twist of fate, the same kid wound up in my year 8 English class this year.